Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. She works at SPIN, Special Parent Information Network, to provide resources, information, and supports to families who have a child with a disability aged birth to 22. She is also a mom to a senior at Kaahanui High School and has been married for over 23 years. Let's welcome Amanda Kaahanui.
All right, aloha everyone. Mahalo ladies for that wonderful welcome. Appreciate that. I am from SPIN, the Special Parent Information Network. We are a partnership between the Department of Education and the Department of Health. Our office actually sits in the Disability and Communication Access Board. We are having our own conference virtually coming up on October 23rd. I put the link in the chat. There we go. And feel free to join us for that one as well. It is a free event. We just like you to register so we know who's coming. So I'm going to go ahead and start my share here. All right. So we today are going to talk about communication. And can I just get a thumbs up from Kaahanui and Christy that you can see my screen okay? Yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you. We're going to talk about communication between schools and families today. There we go. So again, my name is Amanda Kaahanui. I have been in Hawaii for about 26 years now. I have a son. He is 17, going to be 18 next month, and he is a senior at Kaahanui High School. He is a student with a disability, and he is on a graduation track. So it takes a lot of effort to move our kids through the system, and definitely so for special ed. And communication has been one of the things that I've worked on throughout our academic career with Ikaika in school. And so I'm hoping to share some of the things that I've learned along the way as for myself, as well as hearing from other families and school personnel. So today we're going to talk about the different ways that schools communicate with families. We're going to talk about some of the barriers that happen to communication. We're going to talk about some strategies that you might use to improve communication with your families or with the school, and some tips and tricks. And if we have time at the end, then we would love to have some questions and answers and talk story. And if you can share something that's really worked for you, okay? Because this is all about sharing out and sharing our resources together. No need for create the wheel. But before we get started, I just wanted to chat a little bit about the Hawaii Board of Education policy on family engagement, family partnership. I'm not going to read all of these. I just highlighted a few key components in each of those 6 standards that the Board of Education has for communicating and engaging with families. The first one is welcoming all families into the school community. And this might seem like, why do we even have to have that? But I've got a special ed background, and I can tell you that if children in special ed in the school community, they're not always included, and they're not always seemingly welcome, and definitely families don't always feel like they're part of that school community. So welcoming all families, regardless of their child's academic needs or their language needs or anything else, is really important, and it's the first step. Standard 2 says we should be communicating effectively, not just one-way communication, but really having feedback loops, having full communication with families in the way that they find really useful. Standard 3 says that we should continuously partner. So it's not a one and done, right? It's not a, hey, come and provide cupcakes at the bake sale, and now your engagement with the school is over for the year. When we're talking about continuously partnering with families and schools together, is continuously moving that needle forward so that we can support all students and help them to get the best education possible. Standard 4 says that we should be empowered to advocate not only for our own children, but for every other child. So if I see something that could be improved at a school, even if it doesn't affect my kiddo personally, I should be able to advocate as a parent and say, let's improve this school, let's improve our community, let's make it better for all kids. It's something that I have always had a challenge with as a special ed mom, because often I get told, like, you can only talk about your own child, when I see something that could benefit all students, not only with disabilities, but without disabilities. So I really like Standard 4 as well, that I am empowered to try to raise the bar for all students in our state. Number 5 says that we are equal partners and we all bring something to the table. And I think that's really important as well, because if you've got a power imbalance, you know, with one side looking down on the other, you're never going to have effective communication. So when we talk to families, we talk to teachers and schools, we really want to put each other on that equal playing field, that everybody brings a little something that's important to the conversation. And then standard 6 is that families and school staff engage not only with one another, but with the community around them. When we talk about a community of supports, we talk about a community school and this partnerships that we have, it isn't just with the parent. We're also working with businesses, with faith-based organizations, with just really everyone in our school who has a stake in raising up our children and getting them the best education that they can get. So that's our Board of Education policy here in Hawaii about parent engagement and parent partnerships. So when we think about communication, we also think, like, how do we like to be communicated with? Everyone's a little bit different, but I'm pretty sure most people don't appreciate the one-way communication when it comes to schools, right? That's linear. It's usually like, I'm telling you something, I'm giving you information, and there's limited feedback loops on that. When we have two-way communication, that's when it becomes really interactive. That's when I feel like I have an equal say, or I can step up and say something to provide some feedback, or just being able to share something new that I might have learned. So we all want to strive for that two-way communication when we're working between families and schools. Now, hopefully most of you have heard of universal design for learning. It stemmed actually from universal design in thinking about things like sidewalk cutouts, right? Think about the sidewalk cutouts and how sidewalks used to be. They always had the curb. Well, if you're a wheelchair user, those weren't very friendly to get around. So they started cutting out the sidewalks. And now bicyclists, I'm a scooter user, I use those cutouts to get around. Moms with strollers, delivery truck drivers, everybody benefits from creating something that was for a certain group of folks, but it actually was universally welcome for everyone. When we think about universal design for learning, it's sort of the same concept. You design your curriculum for the students that have, you know, maybe the lower set of understanding, and then you ramp up from there. If you start thinking that all kids are at this upper level or mid-level, we're going to miss groups of kids. So universal design really talks about different ways to reach out, different ways to get information back, and different ways to motivate. And so does universal design for communication. So consider different ways to reach out to families, not just like, I sent you an email and you didn't respond, so I guess we're done, right? Maybe there's a barrier there if someone's using email. Consider ways to accept different types of feedback and partnership from families. Maybe they can't do that bake sale, but maybe they can create the flyer for you. So there are different ways that we can get information back from families and to partner with them. And consider different ways to motivate them. I always try to get our teachers to say, you know, if you want me to come to something that might be a little challenging in my schedule, if you offered, you know, 5 points of something for an assignment that he did that he maybe didn't do as well as, but he could raise his grade by 5 points if I come and interact with you at something, that's motivating to me and to my kiddo, right? So that might get me there in order to have the conversation and build those partnerships, because we can't build partnerships if we're not together in either the same space or same room or same email or same Zoom, whatever that might look like. When we're talking about school to family communication, we have different ways that we share information with families, but they kind of get clumped together into either a passive communication, a direct but one-way communication, or a direct and two-way communication. And so when we think about websites and calendars and newsletters, that's often a way for schools to share out information, right? I get this school newsletter, but it's on me to check my email, make sure it comes, click on the link, open it up, and actually read through it. May or may not have time this week in order to do that, and I might miss something. actually had to go back and find something about school pictures recently. I've got a senior, so I'm trying to figure out, what do I do about senior pictures? I knew there was something in a newsletter. I can't remember which newsletter it was. I think I might have deleted it. Where is it? I'm looking on the website. I can't find it there. I'm looking on the school calendar. Is there a date for school pictures? And I ended up calling the school, and they said, it's on the website. I said, I don't know where it is on the website. It's on the thing for the newsletters. Like, I click on that and it doesn't work. And it just felt like I was stupid because I didn't know where they had put something, right? So websites are a passive way to share information, but they're not the only way, and they definitely have cracks that people can fall into in order to receive that information. It's a good starting point so that we have it accessible for most people, but it's not something that not everybody can see or do. When we talk about direct and one-way, those are often those informational meetings at school. There are back to school nights, curriculum nights, math nights. I've seen those, and those are great because we go, as a parent, I go to the school, I sit down, and someone is talking at me. They're telling me about something, they're giving me information, but there isn't a lot of a feedback loop here. Often we get told, so I remember last year, in the middle of COVID, and we were being told what our options were going to be for learning that year, the modalities. And when in this informational meeting, I said, who gave feedback on this? Did families have feedback? No, there wasn't any way for us to share back with the school what we felt about something or really ask questions. It was really just, we're here to tell you information and then you go home. So it's direct, but it's often just one-way communication. When we get into that two-way communication, that's when we're having actually a phone conversation, or I'm texting back and forth. This afternoon, I'm emailing with one of my son's teachers about an intern opportunity for him, and she's going to call me later. So we're going to take advantage of the phone and the email today to really get down and talk story about what that's going to look like for him. I also use apps like the Remind app or Participation app, because he may get something from the teacher, and me as a parent also getting those same messages allows me to then have a conversation with my kiddo. Hey, English teacher sent out something on the Remind app that essay is due in 2 weeks. Where are we sitting with that? How are you doing? How do I help you? What kind of supports do we need to do to get that finished? And without that Remind app, which I can also text back to the teacher and ask them a question, when was it due? Do we have times to work on this? Where was it extra thing? It allows us to communicate back and forth about a specific item without waiting for the end of the day sometimes, or through meetings or whatever that might look like. So sometimes apps can be a really nice way to communicate with families and teachers. And then the last one here is parent-teacher conferences, which are a great opportunity for families to talk to the teacher, find out what's going on. But honestly, my own personal experience is we got like 10 or 15 minutes. Those things were scheduled back to back. And if someone else had a longer session, then you felt like you had a less time, right? So if I had 15 minutes to meet with my teacher, the first 5 minutes is spent like coming in, bringing your stuff in, settling down, meeting the teacher, because it might be the first time you're actually face-to-facing with them, giving a little background. And then you've got 10 minutes to try and delve into our kids' education and what might be going on, how we might improve things, where things need to be helped with. So it's a great way to communicate with families, but it's a really short window that we have with them. So these are just some of the ways. Now, as I'm going through and just, talking, if you've got a question, if you've got a comment, please do put it in the chat and we will chat about it at the end of the presentation, okay? Ooh, I'm gonna move my window over to the other side. There we go. When we think about some of those barriers, we talked a little bit about that in the previous slide, for families to communicate with schools, we see actually a pretty long list here, right? Work schedules between parents and schools don't match. Families might be working a graveyard shift. They might be working 2 or 3 jobs. I just looked back on I used to keep an old like paper book. I called it my book. It was my calendar before I went to smartphone calendar, right? And it was from 2009. I had saved it for that long. And I was looking through, and my kid was 6 years old. I was like, wow, I worked 3 jobs that year. I'd forgotten. And then trying to, get everything done was really challenging. And I thought, wow, must have been really hard to try to schedule something with the teacher or back to school night or anything, because I was working 3 jobs. So that really can be a barrier. Sometimes we hear from teachers through SPIN, through my job, is that, families are unengaged, families don't respond, families, they could just be really busy and really burnt out and tired. We just don't know sometimes. Another barrier is, of course, language and culture and immigration status. Sometimes families don't want to come out. They might feel like they have to be in the shadows because their immigration status is in question, or a language and culture challenge. So just always be thinking about that. Offer interpreters if we can get them. Work with community groups. Sometimes that can help break down a cultural barrier to communication. Sometimes we find different cultures feel like the teachers are the professional. They put them on a pedestal, and they don't feel like they can even contact them, because like, what you're doing, and I am just the lowly parent. And that's just a cultural challenge that we can find with many students in many schools. So thinking about how to reach around that to community members, faith-based organizations, to connect to the families and really let them know that you are approachable and that you want to partner with them and that their input is important. Sometimes we find bad experiences with a teacher or a school can be a big barrier to communication. A family might have had 3 years ago the teacher from heck that they felt was not a good fit for them or their student, and they just had to deal with it all year long, and it created some conflict. And that conflict can last through the child's education if we don't figure out a way to break that bridge down and build up a new one. Sometimes it's a personal experience that the person had themselves at high school or elementary school or something in their past where they just had a bad experience and it stuck with them like a bad taste in their mouth, and it's really hard for them to break through. So often then the onus comes to the teachers or the schools to try to reach back out and try to build that new bridge. We do find that technology and Wi-Fi and devices and the knowledge about all of those things can be a barrier. These past year and a half, we've done meetings virtually, and for some families, that is just really challenging. If you're on a neighbor island and you're in spaces that just don't have access to a Wi-Fi signal, how are you supposed to have a meeting with the school or attend that open house, virtual open house, if you don't even have a Wi-Fi signal, right? So that can be a barrier for families. Sometimes we find that there's health issues in the family. Maybe the parent has a disability and they're unable to communicate in the way that maybe the school is used to communicating. We find sometimes families who have deaf parents have a hard time trying to get an interpreter to come to meetings so that that parent can access the meeting or the event appropriately. We see that transportation definitely is a challenge for lots of different reasons, but if you're having an event or a meeting and they can't get there, then you think, this parent is just, they're not engaging. Maybe they just couldn't get there. Maybe they didn't have the money for an Uber. Maybe they missed the bus, right? So transportation definitely can be a barrier. Shared or complicated custody or foster care can be a problem for families. I worked at the zoo for 16 years in the education department, and I remember a student that had a really complicated custody battle going on where mom would drop him off and dad would pick him up. And so I'd have to wait, if I had a challenge with the kiddo, because the kiddo was going through a lot of stuff. And we had some behavior challenges. And so mom would drop him off, tell me something, and then she'd leave, and then dad would pick him up. And so I would tell the dad, but they weren't communicating, and I have to wait kind of until the next day when mom had him again and try and talk it out. But that's hard when you're checking 40 kids into a program to have sort of these conversations. So it can be really challenging when there are custody issues or the child is in foster care and you're dealing with a foster parent or a guardian of the state with the child, to try to get meaningful communication to support that student. We hear from families that sometimes, childcare for other children is a barrier. I really wanted to come to that math night because I really want to support my kiddo, but I've got 4 other children, or I've got 2 other children, or sometimes I've got one little toddler. Where are they going to go? I cannot focus on math if I'm trying to deal with a toddler who wants to get down and run around, right? So childcare can be a barrier. And then, of course, right now, everything is lived through the COVID filter and all that entails. There's a lot, and we think, just when we think like, oh, we're over COVID is not done with us. And so we are continuously finding barriers that COVID provides its own unique set of challenges for us. So we've talked a little bit about some barriers. There's a lot of them, but we also do have a lot of strategies that we can think about when we're wanting to build these relationships, build the connections between the school and the family. Because we all recognize that when families and schools are communicating, the children do better, right? So one of the ways is to introduce yourself to families if you are a teacher. And it can be a letter, it can be an email, it can be in person, which are a little more challenging with COVID, right? Nobody comes on campus. We don't drop our kids off as much to school with COVID. I've seen Zoom calls. I've seen a Zoom video. One teacher did a Zoom video. She recorded herself, who she was. She showed her kids. She showed her pets. And what that did, when I saw that, I thought, here is a person who has a passion for teaching. She became a person to me because I got to see her living room. I got to see her kids and her pets, right? She showed me a painting that she liked to do. So now she is an individual who likes to teach our children versus that teacher over there who's doing these things. If I can make you into a person, if you can make yourself into a person that we're on the same path, we're working toward the same goals, that can go a long way. I've seen teachers asking parents how and when they would like to be communicated with, right? So remember, that barrier for technology might be there. Maybe they don't have Wi-Fi. Maybe they have a phone, but they only have so many minutes on the phone. Or maybe they don't have text on their phone. My husband's BFF does not use text. And so his only way to communicate is by phone or by email. That's it. You cannot text with the guy. Some folks can't Zoom. Some folks can't come in person for, well, COVID, of course, for everything right now. But that might be a way for that they can come in or that they can't come in. So just ask them, and maybe you can start to kind of clump things together, or, I can do a Zoom call and I know I'm going to catch these families. I'm going to do a letter. I can catch everybody with that. So just think about how families like to be communicated, and if you don't know, ask them. We don't actually mind those kinds of questions. When we are wanting to have effective communication, we want to foster trust and confidentiality. That's kind of the baseline, right, for partnering with one another. We have to trust each other. So what this really means is no know-it-alls and no blabs, right? We do see sometimes teachers themselves will put themselves on a pedestal, right? I went to school for this. I have been doing this for the last 25 years. I know what I'm doing, and you're just a parent. I've seen teachers like that. It's very difficult to talk with them. I respect that they have 25 years of educational experience behind them, but things have changed. We have new ideas. There's new programs. There's new ideas out there. And if you're stuck in like, I know it all, how are you learning and growing as a person? It's really challenging. So just be open to new ideas, foster that trust with one another. And if somebody tells you something in confidence, don't blab it out, right? Asking questions and listening to the answers is a really important one. And it seems really silly, but sometimes we get asked questions and then we feel like, as a parent, like, I told you the answer, were you Are you listening? Sometimes we expect what the answer is going to be. We ask the question, and then we already think in our minds, we know what that question, the answer is going to be, and then we don't really pay attention to the real answer. So active listening is really important on both sides of the table. We want to have schools acknowledge parents, that they are your partner. And we can assume, you know, through that Board of Education policy, oh yes, our school believes in parent partnership. Our school believes in, you know, full communication with families. But if you don't actually tell parents that you appreciate their time, that you consider them your partner, they may not get that message from you. If you just assume that that's the school culture and that they'll know that as well, they're not. And how empowering is it when you can look at a parent and say, I really appreciate you coming today. I really appreciate your feedback. That parent is going to probably tear up, have a lot of emotions, and you're going to be their BFF for quite a while, unless you blab or don't foster trust, because they may not have been told that before, that they're appreciated as that equal partner, just because of the way school cultures sometimes work. We also want to remind you to have good follow through, be consistent, and be clear and solutions oriented, right? So if you need to share concerns about something, just be upfront. Don't say like, let's have a Zoom meeting. And then family's like, okay. And then you get into a Zoom meeting and they're like, rah, 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 rah. Your kid didn't turn in anything. Like, what? Instead, say, we need to have a Zoom call today or a phone call or a meeting because Ikaika's not turning in his assignments on time, right? So just being upfront about why you're meeting, what the purpose is of that meeting, and then how you can work together to solve that, you know? So Ikaika isn't turning his assignments on time. And I might say, okay, can we get those assignments, you know, on a weekly basis so that with a due date, so we can put them on my calendar, and from home we can start making sure that those things get turned in. And that's part of that listening as well, if a family says something is going on, and just working together and trying to find solutions together. Okay, so we're going to move into some tips and tricks here. I've got a couple pages of these. The first one is to put yourself in the family or caregiver's shoes. And this can be a hard one because we do hear from the teachers. I just did a new teacher, a SPED teacher orientation not too long ago, and they were saying, oh, this parent, I keep trying to call them. I've tried to email them. Amanda, I tried to text them. I tried all of the things that you put in the, you know, that slide earlier, and they're not responding. I don't know why. I don't know what to do. And it had turned out that the child was newly diagnosed with autism, and the family was really overwhelmed with that diagnosis, what that was going to mean for their child's future, how that was going to change their educational plan. And it doesn't have to be something big like autism. It could be that someone else in the family was diagnosed with something and is sick in the family. It could be that there's a lot of things, right? So just putting yourself in the family's shoes for just a little bit, right? Has there been years of frustration with a teacher or a school? And then anything around COVID, again, that COVID filter, there could be someone losing a job. And so maybe they've lost their phone because they lost their job, or they're so busy trying to get a job that they can't return your call. And then our next one here is asking families to fill out a questionnaire about their child. It's a really simple way to find out more about the student. Ask them about ways they want to see their kid improve. If you ask me how I want my son to improve this year, I want him to improve his communication. He's deaf, and so having communication, he wants to be an oral speaker. It's a little bit challenging sometimes. So that's what I would tell all of our teachers this year. I really want him to focus on that. Here's ways that we can do that together, right? If there are behavior things going on with that student, ask the parent, what's been tried before? What worked? You don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Figure out who has tried something and that didn't work, because you don't want to try that and have it not work. That just sets you back. You want to move forward to this did work and we're going to start here and then build a path forward. So asking families about their kiddo, and more than just like, kind of sometimes getting down into the nitty gritty. It could be what kind of books they like to read. Do they have friends that they hang out with? What is their technology abilities? So that you can start to plan out how to most effectively support that child. Our next one here is when you're sharing information to please be clear in your messaging to families. Dates, times, deadlines, testings, events, expectations for everybody included. This little red box that I have here is a sample of some family communication that came from an organization that my kiddo attends. It's a virtual program for deaf students, and they were sending out this at the start of a new session. The one thing that really got me was kind of the yelling. The required and the mandatory are all in caps, right? That's text yelling when we're doing that. And she also obviously cut and pasted, because she said parent classes are Friday at, and then there's nothing. There was no date, there was no time given, but they are required, and you're allowed 2 excuses. But like, what happens if I don't come? Are you kicking my kid out of the program? And then she said, make sure to tell these 2 people the night before you're unable to attend. And I thought, yeah, that's really great. I've got my calendar here with my phone. I know if I have a doctor's appointment or something and that we just can't make it, I'm for sure going to let them know that. But with families, especially with multiple kids, we have got lots of things that happen, and they happen like now, right now. My kid fell down and there's a rock sticking out of his head. We're not going to make the parent meeting tonight. But do I have an opportunity to tell them the night before? No. So that was very, for me, not family-friendly language, not taking into consideration that life is happening every day in every moment, and sometimes I can't make a parent meeting because of it. The other thing here under the purple electives and labs starts Monday, and let us know which mandatory lab class your child will join. When I looked at their handout, it had the labs, it had the names of them, but that was it. There was no day that the classes were taking effect. There was no times. There was no instructor information. There was no details about the class. Like, it's an art class. Great. Is that mixed media? Is it painting? Is it scrapbooking? Is it clay? What's the age level? Because this program works from birth to 20. Is he going to be with toddlers, or is he going to be with teens his own age? Like, there was none of that information. And so when I emailed them back and said, can you please share some more information about these mandatory classes he's supposed to take? And they said, oh, no, they're not mandatory. You can join if you want to. But that wasn't that original messaging to families, right? So just please make sure that you're clear in your message, that you include dates and times, and that the expectations are clear for everyone. And you'll probably have a lot less frustration or parents like me going, wait a minute. Our next step here is to use I statements. We've probably all learned this along the way. I remember doing counseling with my husband way back when, and that was one of the things that they said, use I statements. Instead of, you're doing this, it's driving me crazy, I feel like I'm not up to stuff when you don't like my cooking, right? It takes the onus off of like blaming the other person when you're putting it back onto yourself. So my sample here is, I noticed Ikaika didn't turn in his assignment. Does he need more time? Is a lot different in tone than, why didn't Ikaika turn in his assignment? It's late. Now I'm defensive. I'm defending the kid who should have turned his assignment in on time, and I'll be talking to him after the conversation of, why didn't you turn your thing on time? But to the teacher, I'm defending him where maybe I shouldn't have been. I noticed he didn't turn in his assignment. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. He had something that's come up in the family yesterday, and when is this due? We will get this turned in. We will prioritize this, right? It's a very different conversation depending on how you phrase it. Our last couple here comes with checking your body language and tone, right? So the tone of the I statement can really make a difference. And if you're talking to someone, whether they're virtual or in person, and you do the whole arm crossing thing when they start talking to you. Oh, please, Mrs. Kaahanui, please tell me what you feel about this thing, right? That person doesn't look like they are willing to listen to what I have to share because they are closed off, right? That was one of those basic things that I learned in that, I statement, and also body language and tone. So think about how you're saying it, thinking about what you look like to that person. Look in the mirror and ask that question. Would you want to answer it if it was asked that way to you? Our next one here is to please try and send out positive feedback. And I have twice a month here, but that's, it's all about your schedule. But if your communication to family is only bad, they are not going to want to talk to you, right? If we had a teacher, the only time that they contacted me was if something was going on, if there was a behavior in class, if you didn't turn something in. And I really started to cringe when that teacher reached out to me because all it ever came was bad news. And that's something that I like, oh, okay, I have to figure this out. Versus a teacher that I see them in the hallway and they say, oh my gosh, Amanda, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad I get to see you. Guess what? I have to share this thing that happened. Oh, I just feel lifted. I feel like my kid did something well. He was kind to somebody was kind to him. Oh, I have a lot of aloha for that teacher for quite a while after I get that positive message. I've gotten texts from teachers, hey, I just want to let you know that Ikaika got an A on his test today. Huge. That's huge. I got a SPED kid. Any A on a test is huge deal, right? So just being able to share, and whether that's on Mondays, on the 15th of every month, you just go through your class list and you write down something positive that each kid did. It's not only going to help the families, it's going to help the student as well, especially if they're struggling, to know that there are some things that they can do right. So please consider that as part of your communication strategy to families, because they'll want to hear more from you if that's the case. And the last tip here is to follow up on emails after important conversations. I have been in a lot of hallway conversations, when you're picking up the kid or dropping off the kid, or just, dropping something off at the office and you see somebody and you have that 5 or 10 minute conversation that was so important, like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad, or got that question answered for me, or something, or we need to do this thing. Then either I will go home or the teacher goes back and at the end of the day will send me an email saying, I'm so glad we got to talk today, Amanda. Here's what we talked about and here's what we agreed to. That is really important. We always tell families to follow up with conversations from the phone or from an in-person conversation. Just saying, thank you for your time talking with me today. Here's what we talked about. Here's what I understand that we agreed to, and here's, the next steps. That puts everybody on an equal playing field, because if I heard something and the teacher on her side says, oh, that's not how I intended it, if I don't reach back out and tell her that, she's going to think that I got her side of the story, and I'm going to think that I got my side of the story, and we're all good, and we could be completely missing the whole point of the conversation. So we always try to advocate for families and for teachers in schools to follow up with an email. And if you can't email the parent, then type it up, print it out, and pop it in a letter and put it in the kid's backpack to get to them, or send it to them in the mail, just so that we are all on the same page. Okay, we are almost done. We're almost made it through, guys. We want to remind you to remember the 5 C's of communication. The first part of communication is being a welcoming and active listener, providing that encouragement and those good things that kids do, sharing out resources. You get a lot of resources as teachers. Parents learn about new resources in the community. Share them with one another, because if we keep them to ourselves, it's no good, right? We have to be able to share and grow each other's knowledge. And if you don't know something, it's okay to say so. We often see, teachers being either put on that pedestal, or sometimes they put themselves on that pedestal, that I am the professional here. I know what I'm doing. I can do this thing. But we don't know everything, right? Doctors are practicing medicine, right? They don't know everything. They'll die with 100 years of doctor experience, still not knowing everything. Teachers and parents, the same thing. We don't know everything. We don't know the answers to everything, and it's okay if you don't. If you give the impression that you do know all of the answers, and you give me an answer that I then find out later is incorrect, I'm going to have trust issues with you. I'm going to wonder, I'm going to have to fact check everything, because one time you kind of went off the hip and gave me an answer and I found out that it wasn't true. I've had my own experiences with that. When I worked at the zoo in education, I did tours and I got all my animal information straight, but somebody asked me about a star in the sky that last week was Mars and this week is Jupiter, and I gave the wrong name, and the guy heckled me for the rest of the tour on my animal information because I didn't know what the star was, and I didn't step up and say, I don't know, but we'll find out after the tour, right? So it's okay to say you don't know. I have a lot more respect for folks that say, that's a great question. Let's get back, we're going to circle back around and get the answer for you. Being considerate of one another, having empathy, providing things in a timely manner. Don't send me my document that I have to sign tomorrow. Don't send it to me today, because I got a pretty busy schedule myself and I need a couple of days. And I may be able to read it myself, but maybe my husband can't read it, right? So we need to be able to get information to families, give them enough time, but not too far in advance, trying to find that little happy medium, because sometimes you give me something and it goes in my inbox and I don't see it again. So please make sure that we're trying to have things in a timely fashion. Being collaborative, being open to receive input from your community, from your parent partners, and focusing on the students' needs. We always want to make sure and wrap that back around about the students' needs. Being creative and thinking outside the box, right? Being open to new ideas and new suggestions, and remembering that all of our kids are different and that an educational model doesn't fit all of the kids all of the time. I think we saw that last year as well. And then having confidence, so it's one thing to not put yourself on the pedestal and be the be-all know-all, but it is also another thing to have confidence that as a teacher, you went to school for this. You have experience. You have collaborators around you in your school that can help and support you, or outside of your school that can support you. And so I trust my teachers, our teachers at school, and our leadership, that they are the professionals there and they do know what they're doing. But I want them to do that in a respectful way and not a I'm the boss kind of a way, right? Because you can't be a partner if one person puts himself above the other. So having the trust in yourself that you know what you're doing, but also being respectful of one another. Okay, that's going to put me at question time. We've got some time here. I know we'll wrap up a little bit at the very, very end. And I do have some resources if folks are interested in them. I did put them into my folder, my file. So if you would like to access the PowerPoint or any of the resources there, or my email is there to reach out, I'm super happy to continue the conversation. So I'm going to mute myself, and if we have questions, then we will tackle them one at a time. Does anybody want to unmute? Does anybody have a question? Does anybody have a story they would like to share about working with a family or working with an educator or a school, and how they were able to come together and work on communication?
Sure, I'll share. Hi, I'm Janet Mayelua from Kamiliki Elementary. I'm the PCNC here. I think back to, I think it was 2010. No, sooner than earlier than that. And I was getting back to going to grad school, and I had a parent in class in our school who was very, very adamant about this relationship she had with her daughter's teacher. The daughter was first grade at the time, and the parent was very upset because the teacher wouldn't allow. The teacher is very kind of an older veteran teacher, and had very set ways of how she wanted students to address adults, not Auntie so-and-so, but more like Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so. And so it was an interesting dynamic to watch how they communicated. But I guess one day, I don't know what had happened, but I was in the back of the office at the copy machine, and I get a phone call from the front office in a whisper. And it's one of our clerks who says, Janet, can you come to the front office real quick? And I'm thinking, okay, so I do. And then all of a sudden I hear this loud yelling. This parent had lost it and was in the front office. Luckily, there was no children around. But the two clerks were hiding behind in the office. There was this tall mailbox thing. I know, it's funny. And they're hiding behind the mailboxes, and they're pointing, going this way. And so I come in and I'm hearing this parent, and the staff is pantomiming, do something, talk to her. They're doing this and so I'm trying to get there, get the situation. And finally, when I talked to her and I said, can I help you? Tell me what's going on. And we were about this close. She was right up in my grill, and she said, kids don't come to school by themselves, they come to school with their families. And when she said that, that was boom, that was the light switch I needed for my schoolwork, for my grad work, because I was doing my master's at the time. But at the same time, I thought if all personnel, all teachers could hear what she's saying, that was truth. In that moment, that was truth. The kids bring everything with them, right? Whether the parents are having an argument the night before, or they forgot their stuff in the backpacks or something at home that morning, whether they are, and you can see it on the children's faces, right? I work in an elementary school. I can imagine what it's like for a high school or a middle schooler if they've got multiple generations at home, and there's arguments going on, and there's, or no sleep, lack of sleep because they are in a shelter, or lack of sleep because they are in a car with 3 other siblings and a single mom or single dad, right? So these are all different things. But when she said that kids don't come to school by themselves, they come to school with their families, I thought if every single teacher could hear that while they're going through College of Ed and learning that's going to make a difference, because and that guided my research work, because then I was looking at strength-based approach. What are strength-based approaches that we can use for? So that's what I just wanted to share, just something to think about if you're a teacher. Follow.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Welcome.
That's really important to remember, that they are not little silos.
No.
When they come in, right? They're bringing all of that stuff,
all their lived experiences.
Yes. And families too, right? When a parent comes on, they might have more than one student. They might have them in different grades, right? And they're trying to balance all of that together.
Right.
And the values, right? Where the teacher's saying, you must call me Mrs. Smith.
Yeah.
And the kids only known any adult as auntie. That is the respect that you give to an adult, auntie. Not or tutu, right?
Right.
Would you like to be called tutu, or would you like to be called auntie? That's the kids' vernacular, and trying to change that, it can be very challenging and confusing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story.
Welcome.
Anybody else have a question or a story they would like to share?
Hi, I don't really have a story or question, but I just wanted to say your information coming here today is very helpful for me. I'm new as the PCNC here at Pearl Harbor Elementary School, and we've talked about all this communication and using the eyes, using the empathy. And as you're doing that, I'm sitting here going, I'm trying to start my new volunteer program, modifying it because we can't have them come in, trying to communicate it. So all of this stuff, and hearing Janet talk about, they come in with bringing their families. I have to remember I'm dealing with those families that I'm trying to help support these kids. So this was all very beneficial just to hear these few things. And I just wanted to let you know that. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Kimberly. And as you're working as a PCNC with the school, please don't forget our SPED families. often we get left out of the school community, right? If the student may spend some time in the gen ed, may spend some time in resource, and may spend all day in the fully self-contained or FSC classroom. And when kids are separated like that, their parents are also separated, and they are not part of that larger school community. I can remember, wanting to be on the PTA in elementary school, and then thinking, like, I went to one meeting and I thought, this has nothing to do with me or my child's education right now. It's nothing about SPED. And SPED kids are part of our school, but they just didn't have those conversations, and I felt so left out. And it wasn't until my son went to middle school and was in an inclusion program that I felt really connected to my school. I actually joined the PTA, I became an officer, and we got to talk about things about all of the students experiencing things on campus. So please do keep the SPED families in mind, especially for volunteer work. There might be things that they could do with their SPED teacher or with other parts of their grade levels to help them feel connected to their school.
Good point, and thank you for sharing and reminding me of that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? Did we miss any questions in the chat, ladies?
No questions in the chat, mostly affirmations and comments. There's some good comments in the chat. I wanted to just share one. When you were talking about barriers to communication, somebody mentioned multi-generational homes where grandparents have children or custody of children or are taking care of children, and may, the information may skip them, or there's like a block to the communication there.
Right, because maybe they don't have email, right? Maybe they don't have a smartphone to get the text messages or be on that app. And also there's a generational difference, right? I think families in our day and age are a lot more even expected, and they expect themselves to be part of the solution, part of that school community. Whereas, my generation, when my mom was raising us, she went to parent teacher night, and that was kind of it. She sent a cake for the cakewalk and things like that. But definitely generationally, grandparents don't feel like they have, it's a kuleana to be involved. Like, they send them to school, you do their thing, you bring them home, and I do my thing, right? And so helping them understand that they are part of the child's education, that they're part of the school community, I think that they would appreciate that as well.
That was my comment. I'm sorry, but because I saw it firsthand at the school where I was doing the research work at. What was really cool is that one of the younger parents in the neighborhood, this is a close-knit neighborhood, and she would purposefully help the grandparent who had custody of these grandchildren and go and find out. So besides taking care of her own two children, she was helping the grandparent with other two of her mo'opuna, and trying to find out what was going on in the classroom, so she can help grandma navigate what was going on. And I thought that was such a really neat spirit of cooperation. So yeah, that's what I had shared, that being aware. So teachers need to be aware of that as well, and school offices, I think, as well. So
right,
yeah,
because that becomes part of that kind of complicated custody that we see sometimes.
Yeah.
And in Hawaii, especially, multi-generational families, parents are going to work, grandparents are watching the kids, right?
Right.
So we need to include everybody in that.
Thank you. Sorry, I won't talk anymore.
Oh, no, we appreciate your feedback. Thank you. It's good. Anybody else want to share something that's worked for you? Or sometimes I hear like, okay, I got this, mom, and I don't know what to do. And we can brainstorm a little bit. We hear that sometimes. Let's see. How do you recommend schools create two-way communication without overwhelming teachers when they're not allowed on when parents are not allowed on campus? Whew, that's a good one. I've seen recently some virtual open houses. And then I saw a school on the Big Island that had this really amazing virtual open house, and they worked so hard. The teachers came, it was after school hours, and the teachers showed up, and then very few families did. So it's really difficult sometimes to find that ground where everybody can meet at the same time. And what I might suggest is asking the parents what ways they like to be communicated, when or how they like to be communicated. You know, is it having these virtual meetings? Is it being able to come and sit in the auditorium socially distanced to get information? Because schools may need to provide a couple of different ways, right? It might just not be like, okay, we're going to do an in-person informational meeting to families and that's it. If they don't come, they don't come, right? Or, oh, we're going to put that in the newsletter and that's how we're going to get the information out. If they don't read it, they don't read it. Sometimes we have to think about doing multiple ways of catching all of our families, because even like kids, no one size fits all. The same with communication with families. So I might just do a survey. You know, it can be something online, it can be a piece of paper that you send home, you know, and it doesn't have to be really long and involved. It can just ask a couple of questions on how they like to be communicated with, when, and if they have suggestions to be communicated with. It's a good question. It's a tough one. Anybody else? Really appreciate the opportunity today to come and talk story with you guys. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. I know you've had a long day already, so really appreciate third session attendees that come and stick with us throughout the day. So thank you all so much. Mahalo nui, and we hope to see you guys. And I did put, I think in the chat earlier, I'll pop it in again for our SPIN conference coming up on October 23rd. It's free to register for families and helping professionals. Got 9 live workshops, 3 live networking rooms, and we'll have 2 pre-recorded workshops as well. So we do hope you'll join us.
Mahalo, mahalo nui Amanda Kaahanui, and for us all to come together, share this space and time with one another virtually. So we do have one last keynote. If you didn't know, he is Saleva'a Atisinoi Konishki. So we're very blessed to have him. He'll probably be very interesting. We'll put that link in the chat to his Zoom meeting that's coming up at 2 o'clock from 2 to 3. Also, one more link that we'll be putting in the chat is the conference workshop survey. So if you went to the session 1 and 2, you probably did the survey. It's the same survey. Please do this one because Amanda will be getting the feedback for this specific workshop from you folks. So please help us get that information in. And just want to mention that the first 500 people who do these surveys will be getting a little Makana box in the mail post-conference. So again, thank you, Kako. Thank you, Amanda. And we're almost done, guys. Have a good rest of virtual conference. Ahui ho.
Mahalo, Kehal. Mahalo, Christy.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.